I'll start with a question to Jon. Obviously, if any of you have got questions for each other, feel free to start, but I'll start off. Jon, in terms of the process that you've been through, how long have you been working on your campaign in Wandsworth?
It's about 15 months. It seems like 15 years at times. It's been quite gruelling. But we started in July last year, and that was when a couple of us went to see our local MP. That seemed to be a good starting point. He was a Labour MP, Martin Linton then, and was incredibly supportive. And through his help, we got some local press. The strategy, as much as it was for our particular campaign, was build a support base without numbers, without parents supporting the campaign. It's very difficult to get any leverage. If you get large numbers, and we're around 3,000 at the moment, you can then get both local and ultimately national media interest. And if you can get the media on board, then that actually leverages politicians. I think there's a certain step change to how politicians behave that says, go away, you're a little group, it doesn't matter, and you have to walk them through a process, and that's done by numbers and media profile leveraging the politicians. And with the New School Network's help, who came on board around September last year, we've now gone through the initial application in terms of the process, and the same with the Kirklees parents. We're about to go into a business case hopefully next month. The bigger picture is, of course, you can't move opening dates for schools. We're reversing back from September 2012. That probably means we need to crack on with design procurement Q1 next year. So, you know, we've had a lot of help so far from politicians and the like, and it's a very broad church, a cast of thousands really, that you have to work with to get something like this done. So it's a lot of hard work, but ultimately we feel it will be worth it. And I should actually say finally that we have selected ARC Schools as our education provider, and so far they have been completely fantastic. Thank you.
Interesting point about the media, which leads me to ask Fiona a question. Obviously, free schools have been very high profile in the media, and there's been a lot of pros and cons and pretty high octane debates going on. So everybody involved it's brought out a whole number of arguments around that. Do you think that media coverage of free schools has been useful, helpful? I mean, I believe that you said that you find that it's sometimes damaging to local schools, that it seems to be saying, you know, local comprehensives are...
Well, I don't think it has brought up many arguments. That's one of the problems. And we've heard two of the myths on this platform this morning. One is that schools are getting worse, which is, I mean, I don't know any evidence to suggest that schools are getting worse. We may not have closed the gaps and done lots of other things, but schools now are much better than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And the second thing is local authorities don't run schools, and they haven't done for years. School governing bodies, by and large, run schools. I mean, I've been a chair of governors of 2 schools for the past 18 years, and the only point at which the local authority became intrusive, actually, was over the BSF process, and that was because of the framework that the then government had put in, within which they had to work around. So I think there are a lot of myths out there about the quality of education in this country, what state schools can do, what's happening to young people, and I think the media are very unhelpful to most schools in this country. The new poster boys are people who found the new schools, because that fits in with this assumption that to be good, you have to be independent. Can I tell you, there's lots of quite mediocre independent schools out there. You don't have to be independent to be good. You can be a good state school within the maintained system. And that's why we've set up these websites, because we believe the best way to get to people is online, and to allow real parents and governors and teachers to tell their stories about excellence that's already going on within the system.
Dale, you've talked about, in your paper last week, Every Teacher Matters, there was an element of looking at parental engagement. I'm quite interested in that, parental accountability. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Fiona's absolutely right in saying independent is not synonymous with good, nor is it a requirement for a school to be good. But I think it would be wrong for us to say that the reverse is somehow true as well, that, you know, actually all you need to have a great school is for it to be firmly enshrined within the state system. The support of its community and the influence of its parents, I think, is very important. And I think that is really the mechanism through which the free school system can be a driver to improve standards. Because actually what it does, or what it has the potential to do, is to make schools directly accountable to parents. we talk about governance. Governance really means accountability, and who is actually going to put the most effort and frankly care most about the outcome of a school's performance? Well, the answer, I would think and hope, is going to be the parents of the kids who go there or who could potentially go there. And we've got 2 examples of that on the platform this morning.
3, sorry, I'm a parent and a governor.
Yeah, yes, of course. In actual fact, this is an excellent point. So Fiona's demonstrated how she got involved in her local school, which is a local authority school, on the governing body, turned it around. We've also got 2 parents here who haven't had that option or haven't been able to effect change in that way, and so are pursuing a different route. I think the point here is that both of these routes are equally valid and both can yield very good results.
I think we've got in the room an enormous number of professionals from various sectors, built environment, from education, people who've supported schools over, mainly through BSF probably for the last sort of 7 or 8 years, and a wealth of knowledge within the room and experience. I suppose the question on a lot of people's minds will be, within free schools, is there going to be an opportunity for the engagement of professionals like yourselves to be engaged with free schools? And at the moment the numbers are very, very small. We're looking at 16 schools, I think 4 more from last week. The government are talking about hundreds of schools potentially further down the line. What has been the sort of level of professional support that free schools have needed going forward, and what might they need potentially over the last year? It's a question for Sobia.
We need a high level of support. That's a given. We do know what our community needs. I mean, in our experience, we've seen that it's not just about the level of education or the standard of education. It's definitely about the fact that there aren't enough places in the area that we have at the moment. We are changing from a 3-tier system to a 2-tier system. So we need the school in the area not just to improve the standards of education, but also to accommodate the children that are left without school places. And in terms of support from professional bodies, yes, we do. We're seeking professional support at the moment. We're partnering with Serco, who are really guiding us through the process. And it really is a steep learning curve. It's new to everybody, and it's nobody's saying that it's going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Change always is, like I said in my intro. But I do feel that with the right support and with the right help and guidance, that anyone that wants to set up a free school can do so.
It's not very easy, though.
No, it's not very easy. It's not very easy. I don't think that it is easy at all. We've certainly learned that over the course of the last year. It's a lot of hard work. We all, as parents, we all have full-time jobs. We all have children. We've got lives of our own, and we have to find time out of somewhere to do all the work that needs to be put into the applications, into the application process. So no, it's not easy, and we do need a lot of support. Nobody's saying that we don't.
In the last panel debate about academies, there was a lot of focus, a lot of talk from the sponsors and businesses who'd been involved, and how much the schools and the businesses had learnt from each other. And that's another aspect of engagement of the community, engagement of the business community. It's also quite high octane, again, with free schools, in that the idea of profit-making organisations being involved with free schools gets a lot of people's backs up. And it's certainly a debate that's not going to go away. I'd just like to ask Indy what you think about the involvement of business in education.
I'm going to duck that question, but I'm going to pick up something else, which is the issue about competition, because that Dale brought up. I'm not sure competitiveness is the key issue, because I think competitiveness is still part of a consumer behaviour. And actually, I think what's being said is we need to talk about parents as investors and create pathways for us to invest. I've got a little boy. I want him to go to the best possible school that's plausible, and I would like to be able to invest into that school, whatever that investment is, and to create pathways for that investment. I think that's the key issue. If we keep progressing with a slightly competitive story, I don't think it helps anyone. Whereas actually, I think what free schools are possibly starting to show is an openness of actually parents being able to get involved in many, many forms creates actually more powerful learning environments. And I think that could be applied more universally rather than it being a competitive approach. So I'm a little bit worried that actually we don't have to resort to a free market ideology. I think there's a sort of collaborative citizen investor story which can be far more fruitful and actually could be far more inclusive of actually the kind of earlier point that was being brought up in terms of actually existing schools and their existing opportunities. So I just want to, we need to be clear about it's an ideological debate, but we need to start to shift away from. It's not about competitiveness from my position. It's about creating pathways for investment and citizen investors into that process.
Anybody else want to come back on any points raised? I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, well, I'll just come in on that. I'd say it's not an ideological debate, it's a practical one. I think in those schools, again, referring to the examples here on the platform, those schools where the parents want to get involved and make a difference, they obviously can do that. Where the effect of competition comes in is for the rest of schools, the schools in the system. One of the big objections held against the idea of free schools is that they will create a two-tier system, or that there'll be this wonderful new generation of free schools and all the other schools will be left to rot, basically. The advantage of if we can introduce genuine competition into the system through allowing parents to have actual, real, meaningful choice over which school they send their children to, that will be a catalyst for lifting standards in all schools, because every school will then have to compete to improve the quality of the education that they provide for all of the pupils who can go there. So I think there's two sides of the story. Of course, those schools with heavy and active parental involvement are going to benefit directly from that, but the competition can ensure that those effects spread throughout the entire system as well.
Can I just say that, I'm sympathetic to some of the arguments about competition, because I think it can be a spur for people to get better, but competition on its own will not solve the problem for the majority of pupils, because in our school what happened was we were in a competitive marketplace. We didn't find the right leadership for quite a long time. We went through a number of head teachers and the school sank to the bottom of the league tables. In fact, when my children, the first league tables were published, only 37% of the pupils got level 4 in maths, which is, now that's about 88%. And that gives you an indication of what the school was like. Without the right leadership and the right teaching, the school will not lift itself, and I think it's a complete myth to think that we just put schools out there in a competitive market and give them freedom and everything will be fine. It won't. Some schools will die, and for the children in those schools, it will be a very unpleasant experience, and they will mostly be the children from the poorer backgrounds, because the sharp-elbowed middle-class parents would have got out and got their children into some other school.
Isn't it just the sharp-elbowed middle-class parents that get on the governing bodies, though?
Yeah, but if they're in their local schools, and that's a very mixed local school, I think that's a good thing. Vocal parents can make a really big difference to a school. They stand up, they've got high expectations, they put pressure on the school and the governing body to deliver. That's been my experience, and I think all schools need that. But that doesn't mean that those parents have to go off and start a new school. In fact, the most efficient way to make schools better would be to harness the powers of those parents to make existing schools better. And I think I'm not myself personally, but I think my group of parents who got involved in our school are a living example of how that can be done.
Of course, in an awful lot of the most disadvantaged communities, that just doesn't happen, and that was the thinking behind the genesis of the original academy programme under the last government, was simply that what's now over 200 schools in the most disadvantaged areas that were performing the worst of any schools in the country just weren't having that involvement. So what the government obviously sought to do was bring in the involvement of an external sponsor instead, to fulfil that role. So I think equally we can't sort of just assume that parents are always.
No, I agree with that. I do agree with that, but those schools did not need to be independent schools to do that. You could have brought in the independent sponsors within the maintained system and made them better. We haven't come back to my key concerns about independent or free schools, which is the freedoms they're going to have on admissions, the freedoms they're going to have on special needs, the freedoms they're going to have to exclude pupils. How, if you get hundreds and thousands of independent state schools, who is going to ensure that those schools comply? And that what will eventually happen is that, the poorer children get pushed out and they find the ways of engineering the most favourable intake for themselves, which we all know is what goes on now anyway. That problem will only get worse.
You see, I don't think it's as black and white as that, and I think we're a good example. I think there are shades of grey in this. I understand what you're saying. We personally on our group think selection is slightly abhorrent. In some ways it acts as a regressive tax because people can't afford to privately tutor their kids, and therefore others benefit from selection. In our particular case, Fiona, what we're trying to do is we're largely a middle-class area, but like London, cheek by jowl with less affluent areas, what we're trying to do is, instead of saying our admissions will be a straight line distance, therefore you will have what Bernardo's called clusters of privilege and selection by mortgage, we're actually against that. What we're trying to do is say we're looking at an admissions policy through the local authority that's based on feeder schools, and that enables us to actually give parents who don't have a voice at the moment to enable them to be heard. So we'll have two largely middle-class schools and also possibly 2 other feeders where the FSMs are at 40, 50, 60%. And what we think that will do will mix up the kids in our local part of the community and actually give all abilities and all backgrounds a chance to thrive. So I don't think it's as black and white as saying maintain good, free school bad. I think it's a bit more nuanced and a bit more grey than that. And we're very, very keen on the social inclusive nature of our own campaign. It's very important to what we're doing.
There's a number of hands going up in the audience, so
Can I just come
you
back
obviously
on that
warmed
as well?
up.
Sorry.
Okay, very quickly.
What worries me is the assumption that sharp-elbowed parents are cropping up willy-nilly everywhere just to set up a school because that's what they feel like they want to do. It's not about that. There are some places like our own where children are left without any school places at all, and they can't go to the neighbouring boroughs to attend schools in those high schools because there aren't sufficient places there. Those schools too are oversubscribed. So the children that are within a community here in Kirklees are left with nowhere to go. There's only an option for our children to travel 8 miles away to a non-local school that has sufficient places to accommodate them. So I think it's worrying that people think that parents are just doing this because they want a better school, they want a better standard of education. It's not always about that.
No, I accept that, but I think if there is a need for new school places, it should be done as part of a coordinated area-wide process where the future of every school is considered, and the school is put in the right place, and it does, the admissions criteria benefit the whole community, not just a part of the community. And free schools operate outside that, what is currently a locally accountable system.